Welcome to Badass Breakthrough. My name is Bridget Bennett. I am your host. I am a high conflict custody and divorce coach, fellow survivor of domestic abuse, and I am here to help you on your way. This show is for those who have found their way navigating co-parenting with a high conflict or narcissistic person, battling it out in family court, feeling like that journey is never going to end, maybe discovering that they are a product of a narcissistic family, and overall for those that are trying to rebuild their life after enduring abuse, whether it was through a relationship or marriage. You're in the right place. This show is for you. So let's get started on this journey together. Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am so excited to talk to you. I think the most important thing of our conversation is for my audience to understand a little bit more about you. And when I hear your name, Vanessa Reiser, the first thing I think of is a woman running in a wedding dress in the state of New York. So can you tell us about this and why did you make this decision?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I had gone through a confusing relationship that ended in 2020, right around COVID. And I was really pissed off, actually, when I figured out what had happened to me, that I had been coerced and manipulated and gaslit and all of the characteristics that narcissists possess. And I thought, how can I make noise about this? Because I was already a therapist. In fact, I was working in the Bronx at an outpatient mental health clinic and doing all the things that licensed social workers do. And I guess I should have known better, this kind of thing in my mind. And I wanted to get the word out. So I'm also a two-time Ironman. So I've done, tons of marathons and all kinds of athletic mastery. So I thought, what can I do that would make a ton of noise? And how can I get attention? And I came up with the idea on a run, which is when I come up with my best ideas. And I decided to run 285 miles across the state of New York in a wedding dress from Oswego to Manhattan in June of 2021.
Okay.
And the wedding dress really was a symbol of that which the narcissist oftentimes dangles or future fakes. The wedding, the baby, the white picket fence, the whatever it is, the business adventure. There's always this kind of dangling of the carrot. So I thought it was going to be a great symbol of something that they would future fake around, and it would get me a lot of attention, which it did.
It sure did, because that's how I came across you. And I've heard women talk about you and just how inspiring you are. In fact, in my community, there were women that were inspired to not only just like get fit or like be more active to help them through their healing process, but also there's women that have contacted me of like, you know what, the wedding dress, I just want to burn it. And not that you burnt your wedding dress, but it was so symbolic and it moved so many women, including myself. So you definitely did bring a lot of noise to the whole area of narcissistic abuse. And it's something that I know that you should feel very proud of. A lot of my audience I talk to, moms primarily all over the country that are in the family court system and they are stuck. They are told that they now have to co-parent with their abuser. What can you say to those that are listening about, that overall advice where they're being told just co-parent? You two should just get along. Is that actually helpful? And what do you think actually works in that scenario?
The family court system is human trafficking. It is domestic terrorism. It is forcing you to hand your child over to potentially a psychopath. So the law does nothing to protect victims, whether it's the abused partner or their children, from these toxic scenarios. And so there is no such thing as co-parenting with a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath. They will exploit those systems that are deeply flawed, whether it's to avoid child support or potentially sexually abuse your children just to punish you, or take your children from you just to punish you. The they sniff out that this relationship with your children is the most important thing to you. So that's your Achilles heel. So that's what they're going to harm, among other things. But it's like the chef's kiss. This is what they really can harm you by. So they figure this out and they will stay in the family court system as long as possible, potentially to bankrupt you, but really to torture you and instill fear and intimidate you. And sometimes it works, because
Yeah.
the judicial system is designed to not support, it doesn't understand what's going on or it doesn't care. So the judges are oftentimes narcissists, the attorneys are oftentimes narcissists, guardians ad litem are oftentimes narcissists. So there's sort of nexus of fuckery. I don't know if I can say that word here,
Yeah.
but
Yes, you can.
it is insane to go into this environment and it takes forever to extricate yourself from it. It's a hellscape, period. Because I often say, like, I was not co-parenting with a narcissist in my scenario, but I often say that I think if I had gone through that, I would have probably taken my son and left the country, or something, or I would have ended up like offing myself. I don't I wrote it in one of the first pages of my book is that my clients are literally warriors, because the other part is there's this dissonance that shows up by design because you have to gift your precious child to this monster. So how can you
Yes.
even believe that that's a real monster and do that thing of even transitioning for the weekend? Like, okay, here you go, little Johnny. I know that father knows you're allergic to peanut butter, but I know he's going to feed you peanut butter. Hopefully you don't die. Like, see you later. This kind of shit. Like, and so it's
Yes.
wild, and the courts do nothing to support. So all of that to say that it's not you. You're not crazy. Every single one of my clients is going through the judicial system. I was recently subpoenaed to a pretty high profile case, and the um the attorney for the defendant in this case was asking me questions and was going through my notes and was saying, Vanessa, like, you talk a lot about the law. And I was like, that's all my clients are talking about. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to be a lawyer, but if every single one of my clients comes into session and goes, what do I do in family court? What do I do in family court? This is all I'm doing is talking about this misery. It's happening in a vacuum. No one's allowed to talk about it outside of this. And it's literally hell. I mean, I did go through it in terms of orders of protection, so I have been, I've had the judge eviscerate me even though I was
Yeah.
being stalked, and so I've had my, run-ins for 6 years I was in court. I just wasn't co-parenting, so that's why I was able to come out and be like, "Fuck you," because I don't have that vulnerability, but to everyone listening, I mean, I just give you a lot of credit. It is not for the weak.
No, it's not. And, I find that when the healthy protective parent, tries to talk about some of the behaviors that they're observing, right? Like emotional dysregulation with their child during these transitions, these exchanges, or, the child is stating that they don't want to go. They simply are starting to refuse to go see the other parent. And then the protective parent is being blamed, right? Oh, it must go to this. All of a sudden, you must be alienating the child, you're withholding the child, you're gatekeeping, you're doing all of these things, you're lying. But I find that when the protective parent actually says, to the abuser, hey, not sure why little Johnny isn't wanting to talk today. I'm not sure why little Johnny isn't wanting to go on the visit today. I'm going to continue to encourage him to speak to you directly. I'm going to bring this up with his therapist. And trying to pull themselves a little bit more into this place of neutrality, I find they get a little less shit from a judge by doing so versus staying in, like, I don't know, he's refusing, I'm not sure, and not really doing anything, but trying to look as if they're encouraging. We all know that, we're not forcing our child to do things, but I see that that is played out a little bit better. Now, we all know that narcissists are extremely charming, charismatic. They come across as like the most intelligent person in the room. That's what they want people to believe. A- And we have in contrast, someone who has experienced years and years of abuse, who tends to be emotionally dysregulated. For me, when they show up in this emotional state in family court, I find that they're not as successful because they're playing into the narrative that the narcissist wants others to believe is that they're problematic, see they're crazy. What can you say about that? Just overall understanding the dynamic between the narcissist and their victim.
Well, I mean, the narcissist saying that you're crazy works because a lot of times we will react. And they are way better manipulators than we are because they've been doing their entire lives. So, what they may have done along the way in their smear campaign to prepare for the discard is capture you, reacting to their bullshit along the way. So, push your buttons, and then get you to do the thing. You react, and they record it, and then they bring these things into the courtroom. So, they are oftentimes also pretty well equipped with collateral beyond. They collateralize everything. So let's say you're in a relationship with a narcissist early on and they're love bombing you and they're asking you questions and they're just sitting there eagerly, like, kind of listening to every word you say because it's like, you're sharing when I was a kid, I remember going into the Benetton store and I stole that sweater. And they're like, "Ooh, you did what? Tell me more about this." So the whole time you're maybe sharing something vulnerable with your partner or even a friend or a colleague and they're narcissistic, there's this collateralizing. So they're gleaning all of this information that they can use as weaponry and exploit later. And so when you get into the courtroom and you're trying to get out of this marriage potentially and co-parent, you don't understand that they have like boxes and boxes of stuff that they've gathered on you already. And this is really scary. I know they will call the police and call CPS and pull things out of literally this clear blue sky, just literally
Yeah.
like I mean, I saw a police report when I left my abuser, and he had indicated that I was drinking or something on this one day, which was untrue. And I thought, oh my God, no shame around lying in a police report at all. No shame whatsoever. Just put it out there. And so that was really frightening. And this is the kind of stuff that they do. It's just to create this narrative and kind of like this gotcha thing when they finally get you in front of, the court.
Yeah, absolutely. What can you tell us like psychologically as a therapist, what do you know is happening with survivors' nervous systems when you leave the relationship, obviously we experience a trauma bond and so breaking that is difficult. But I am myself guilty of initially when I left my abuser, I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now that the relationship's over, we're going to be able to be friends. We're going to be able to co-parent. I'm going to let him know the things that I would want him to share with me, even though he wasn't doing it. And I encounter so many women that are doing the same thing. And why do we fall into giving them the benefit of the doubt?
I think systemically we are taught like that people think maybe like we do. Like when let's say we're in kindergarten or nursery school, be nice to little Tommy and, share and be kind and, you kind of be nice to your siblings. You learn pretty early on, like it's very Freudian actually. And it's good skills, right? You're becoming civilized. Well, those people that are disordered are not learning those same skills and they're pulling these toxic behaviors into adulthood. This idea of like mine, you think that we would all have outgrown that Tommy from nursery
Yeah.
school, but
Yeah.
Tommy may not have figured this out. And so you're up against, this like child that's going to have to win, and who's biting and who's, not sharing and who's a walking id, which is again very Freudian, but they're just there. We are taught to kind of be forgiving, and it's not a bad thing. I think what forgiveness really should be about, though, is an apology and changed behavior, not just an apology. So
Right.
if people don't really deserve forgiveness, it's okay to not forgive. In fact, it can be very empowering to never forgive somebody, because that's just a weird misnomer that people have, again, put into our minds that doesn't really add value. But I think I put in my book, like, if God himself gives you a resume, check the references, because we just don't know, what's going on. It takes a long time to figure out. But I think we hope people would be decent, but then we learn a good amount of people are not.
Yeah, yeah. And, from my experience in dealing with narcissistic, or I call them high conflict individuals, because I'm not sitting here diagnosing them, but, in my experience, they really love to play the victim. And I see that across the board in family court. It's suddenly, a lot of Darvo, right? So they're flipping the script. All of a sudden, they are the ones that have been suffering at your hands. You're the aggressor. And for me, it creates a lot of confusion, right? Like that actually put me, that whole thought of I was to blame for all of the wrongdoings in my marriage and for how my ex was treating me is what got me into therapy in the first place over 12 years ago. And it saved my whole fucking life. My therapist said the most valuable thing to me is, Bridget, what if you start writing things down? What if you start writing down what he's doing, what has happened? And then you can kind of sense the shift. And so I did. I started tracking the behavior that I was experiencing, and almost like how you track your period, right? I grabbed a calendar and I would put like little red X's on it for all of the bad days. And I started to get to this point where there was more bad than there was good. And I would go back through my notes and realize that, oh crap, maybe I'm not the one that's the problem here. And I felt like the whole relationship was very much a roller coaster. When I left it, then having to go into family court, my body was constantly remembering who this person was. And I had severe anxiety, like paralyzing almost anxiety. Is that something that is based off of our nervous system? I think that we remember, right, the abuse. But what can you say about having to then confront this person, be back in a courtroom? It is re traumatizing, re victimizing. But is there any harm in, one who's having to endure it, to have support, to have a therapist, to take medication if needed? A lot of people are in fear of even doing that, thinking it's going to play more into this narrative of I'm crazy, I'm problematic, they're going to take my kids from me. What can you say about that?
I actually see the opposite, because I do a lot of advocating for clients, and also in written documentation, language that supports people who are being victimized and or suffering from PTSD or CPTSD. So they come to me, and I think they are better equipped when they enter the court with some of the documentation that I provide, and others like myself, clinicians that are using the right vernacular in their notes, based on the reported abuse. So they end up, I think, in a better space. I think that used to be the way it was, especially when I first started. Clients would come in and say, I have to come to therapy because he's saying that I'm borderline. I'm not borderline. And then I would assess for borderline. Sure enough, they're not borderline, and things like that. So I think the narcissist will try to push you into therapy and get you to agree to certain things to exploit. But I think we have sort of moved away from that. My clients are feeling very empowered by any documentation that I can provide in terms of notes, biopsychosocials that indicate what their reported abuse is and how it's impacting them, etc. So I think it's changed a little bit.
Okay. Well, like for me, I think I discovered narcissism. I was on a deep dive in Google years ago when I was still married to the abuser, and it got me when I was in therapy. I remember asking my therapist over and over again, are you sure I'm not a narcissist? Am I a narcissist? Am I an abuser? Am I this? Am I the other? And I was so adamant for so long of like, I was really the problem and I was creating these problems. Have you had clients come to you and be like, Vanessa, am I narcissistic? Am I crazy?
Oh, yeah, all the time. I think what happens with the narcissist is that they mirror you so much and they're so overwhelming in terms of their energy grab and they're so enveloping that you become codependent, you become enmeshed. And so it's hard for you to discern like who you even are versus who they even are. Like I remember my abuser coming to like the salon when I would get my hair done. Like he was so far up my ass. And there was this codependency that was like, they were just sort of always present. And I remember when I left that relationship asking myself the same question: am I the narcissist? Because I'm very like piss and vinegar, like I'm tough. And so for me, I'm like, oh my God, it must be me. Like obviously
Yeah.
I'm the problem. The only thing that helped me get out of that hole was I knew I wasn't a liar. And that was my like beacon of light because I was very confused and I was being gaslit for so long and I was stuttering and there were like circular conversations where I just couldn't find the truth. And so that was what I was able to hang my hat on. I found that within myself because I knew I was a lot of things, but I wasn't a liar. And that was like really important for me because the narcissist is always a liar. So that was where I was like, okay, this is my magic. And that's how I was able to climb out of it. And I felt really confident once I kind of like went through the characteristic list. And like there's certain things that we all might do. You know what I mean? So when people go through the list and they're kind of like, okay, I might do this or, I might cut the line or, like there it's kind of hard, but that was the one thing most people would agree that know me. Like I could be a lot of things, but to a to a fault, I will tell the truth, to the best of my ability most of the time, unless, if somebody says, do I look fat in this dress? I may not say, yeah, I'm not going
Right.
to like a jerk, but I'm just
Right.
saying, like, I think that by and large, that was like, so if you can kind of go through the checklist and see what parts of it feel real, I think that was a big thing. And the other thing is narcissists are never asking themselves that questions. They, first of all, they know what they are, by and large. They like the way they are because they are winning. And most of the time they are winning. So they're not wrong. They figured out these manipulative tactics work, but like they're not asking themselves that question. And if they are asking themselves that question in front of people, it's just to manipulate because they already have the answer. But I think those can be important things to think about.
Okay. Now, if we have someone that is, definitely narcissistic, they're abusive, and let's say they end up going to therapy. I'm sure there's many self-aware narcissists. And I have not seen really changed behavior from these individuals. But again, so many of us can get caught in that thought process of, well, maybe they're going to change. Maybe if they go to therapy, they can change. Have you seen a narcissist that is capable of changing their behavior?
I think narcissists can change their behavior if they want to. Sometimes they're mandated to do so. It's very infrequently, and there's generally still this underbelly of agenda. So, sometimes narcissists will come into my practice and they are self aware, and we talk about them working on themselves and they will work on themselves. But then from time to time, there'll be like a giggle and they'll say something like, Vanessa, I just want to have sex. Like it comes out in little ways like, I'll do the things, but really what I really want is this. So, like, they're not emotionally intelligent. They're not going to be doing things, for the greater good. There's an agenda always kind of at the, sort of the foundation of who they are. And it's self-serving. And so that seems to be kind of this glaring neon difference. They don't come into session and they're kind of eager to really change. They'll do the surface changes so they can get the things that they want.
Well, which is good to understand because it helps us understand more of like when all of a sudden you have a narcissistic ex partner and they're asking for 50-50 or sole custody of these kids. It's not because they truly want to have the children. They're wanting to do it because they know that that's what you want and it's going to harm you and hurt you.
Mhm.
Right
Or they want the
now.
optics. Sometimes they want to portray themselves as, this perfect
Oh,
person.
Disneyland dad.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Now, we talk about Darvo a lot, and I see it happen consistently in the family court system. But when I look back at the relationship that I was in, Darvo is a tactic that's just like it's used constantly, right? So there's the gaslighting, then they blame you for suddenly them yelling at you. And it's all your fault that they lied or that they cheated on you, right? It's all your fault that they did these things. Is Darvo anything new? Or is it just now that we've been able to put a label on this behavior that we see?
I think it's just that we put a label on it. I think really the word that I always used before Darvo to describe it was like deflection. So
Mhm.
anytime, and really deflection is gaslighting. So Darvo is gaslighting because what's happening in that moment is you're getting confused. So anytime somebody communicates with you in a way that makes you feel confused, that's gaslighting. So, that somebody might deflect and say, well, I didn't do that. What about that? Sort of moving around all of this kind of like toxic communication um, is gaslighting. And so that's all it is. It's just a deflection.
Do do we get anywhere by defending ourselves or explaining, arguing with a narcissist? Do we get anywhere? Do we accomplish anything by doing any of that?
Yeah, you're probably giving them a boner because they like it.
I love that
That's
you
all
did
you're
that.
getting. You're just getting them fired up, aroused, excited. Ooh, look what I have power to do to this person. So no. And it's funny because I always say to myself if I'm going to be pushed or pressed by a narcissist, I always say to myself, Vanessa, do not give them a boner. And it works. And I refuse. And it regulates the hell out of me. I'm like, stoic. I refuse to get you excited because the narcissist is excited by your response, good or bad, because look what I can do. I can get you to do that thing. Look how powerful I am. So, no, you are not getting anything from engaging with these people. It's just to the extent that you can, obviously avoid it. Now, the family court system disallows you from that. The family court system forces you to give boners, apparently. But you really don't want to do that. You want to avoid it as much as possible, so it's a low contact kind of thing. I mean, so important too, because as I mentioned, if you think you're gonna describe to this toxic co-parent that, little Tommy can't have peanut butter, great. Now look what you just did. You gave information that ensures that little Tommy's getting peanut butter in spite of this allergy. So no. I mean, I always say as much as you can avoid it to the extent that the children should be on fire before you do it is very important because you're only giving them intel that they will exploit. So no, stop communicating with these people for a variety of different reasons. I mean, it's just check, check, check. There's no reason to do it unless you have to kind of like do the parenting app, the parenting
Mhm.
the when you're texting with them on a
Yeah.
on a family app, you know, cover your ass. Yes and no. We don't agree. Da da da. And just get because what happens is once they don't get a rise out of you, all they do is move on to the next person. I often say that it's like being in a prison yard and the beacon light is going around and they're just looking for somebody to get. So you have to duck, they're going to move on to the next person eventually. Unfortunately, sometimes that is your own children, and that's what's so fucked up about this scenario because they will move on sometimes to them. And I don't have the magic for that yet, but to the extent that you can minimize engagement, do it.
What would you say to the parent that is, they're like, all right, I'm not going to give them a boner anymore. I'm going to stop doing this. But now my kid has to go into the situation, right? So the child is not able to escape the relationship that we were able to leave. What is protective parents like? What is the thing that we can teach our children that can help them navigate this really difficult relationship with their other parent? Because they're going to also encounter relationships like this with other people the rest of their lives. So, what can we do to kind of give them like some tools in their toolbox to go to?
There's two things that I think are really important. The one is getting your children very sturdy around fact and fiction. So it doesn't have to be in the relationship with the toxic parent. It could be like on a television show or a movie or at daycare, or even when you're doing puzzle pieces, describing, you could say, like, you could point to the thing that's the color that's red and say, that's blue. And they'll say, that's not blue. And you'll say, that's right. You were right. That's red. That's not true. When I said that was blue, that wasn't true. That wasn't really even true. And so you start early on to get them to understand fact and fiction, because the narcissist will gaslight and will say things that are untrue. So there's this basic fundamental understanding that you want to really get them sturdy around the truth. And it stays, when they get a little older, maybe their friend said something and that wasn't true, or we were supposed to be here at 3:15, but we got here at 3:30. Like real, like kind of identifying like things that are accurate, so that they have this understanding of fact and fiction. The other thing is that when children are young, they blame themselves for everything because their egos are not developed. So good or bad, it's their fault. So a lot of this stuff are like, just so you know, this has nothing to do with you. What mommy's dealing with today, she's in a bad mood. This has nothing to do with you, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you. You go ahead and you do what you need to do, which is maybe you're going to read this book, or I'm going to give you this meal. Like, you do you. This has nothing to do with you, even if it's a good thing. Getting them to understand that this mess is nothing to do with them is really important, because their egos are going to get attached to the good and bad of that. And kind of the other thing would be like autonomy, like
Yeah.
celebrating the different mismatched socks that they put on to go to school, because the narcissist wants to groom. So anytime they do something that's particularly um like autonomous, something where they're doing something on their own, just like really celebrate it. Like, I mean, really, like ice cream, the whole thing, like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you that you did this thing or whatever. So, like, getting them to lean into autonomy, because the narcissist wants to groom, they want to have minions. And so it's hard that it's not a perfect science. These are just some things to think about.
Yeah. What about those? I have a lot of parents that are always worried. They're like waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So they're, you know, going into this co parenting dynamic. It seems impossible. It is impossible. They are wondering what is going to happen next week. Or, well, what if he doesn't take little Johnny to a soccer game or to a soccer practice? Or what if this happens? What if the other happens? And I found for myself that when I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, I was constantly giving energy and attention to my ex. When I let go of that thought, I found so much freedom. Like, I can't control what's going to happen tomorrow. I can't control what my ex may or may not do. I can't control if they go to the soccer game or if they don't. And it feels kind of disempowering. But also, I had this moment where I was like, fuck, I can't control it. It's not my fault. And I found a lot of hope and almost like peace in that because I knew that I wasn't to blame. What are your thoughts on individuals that are maybe they come to speak to you in session and they're like, "Oh God, I wonder what he's going to do next, and I wonder what this will happen, and what about the other, and no, his ex is going to do that, his other ex is doing this, or the new person is doing the other." What is that happens in our body? What advice can you give to someone that's waiting for that other shoe to drop?
It's tricky because, I honor what they're experiencing. There's sort of like this treading water forever until you can get out of the family court system. And even when you get out of the family court system, you're still attached to them. So it just feels like you're stuck. And that's a really terrible feeling for people. Um, I just did a podcast with Gretchen Carlson, and we were talking about NDAs and like not having a voice. And it feels very adjacent in terms of like just being stuck is just a miserable, miserable experience. But to your point, two things can be true at the same time. And so, yes, you're stuck, but also you have to live your life. And it is empowering to live your life. So I think there has to be a level of acceptance around the stuckery of it. And then also you have to do your thing. So like you're gonna have to find, opportunities to experience joy, and you're gonna have to socialize, and you're gonna have to have good sleep hygiene and exercise and eat well and you know, snuggle your dog and take a warm bath and like pursue your dreams. Like you're still going to do all the things. It's just it's like having like a personal terrorist. There's going to be always somebody there lurking. I think what helped me was my therapist told me years ago when I was going through all of this mess. um she described to me that in the Sandy Hook, Connecticut, when those little babies were slaughtered in the
Yes.
kindergarten classroom, the parents had to grieve their beautiful children. And then Alex Jones went on podcasts and talked about how it was a fake fraud. It wasn't real. So on top of their absolute nightmarish experience, they would have these trolls that would come into their DMs and say, "You're a liar." Like, and I thought, wow, this is like spilling over. Like there's no emotional bandwidth to manage that reality. And that really happened. And he was sued for millions of dollars. And but my point is like, if they can radically accept the darkest scenario, then we can radically accept something, that feels really dark. But there are things that people have to really radically accept that are just like unfathomable. Like there's nothing that could make you fathom the first part of that story and then to have people abuse you on top of that. And so I was like, wow, that was a really eye-opening experience. And I will never forget when she said that to me because I thought, wow, okay, if they can do it, I can radically accept that. And she just basically trained me to understand that every time I would go to my car, that there would be someone watching me. And every time I went on a run, and I just began to realize like I just had a fan. There was somebody in the woods. That was it. And
Yep.
it was weird and it's not right. It's wrong, but it helped me to I felt a little bit more liberated by that. Maybe it was just the validation of knowing that so many people have to experience this. Maybe I didn't feel alone or something, but it helped me. So hopefully, your listeners will take something away from that. But it's not an easy task.
No, it's not. And, realizing that there's nothing that you can do to control the other person's behavior, right? But like, we all are stalked. And like with the day of the internet, there's a lot of cyber stalking. What are you going to do with this, right? You can screenshot it, you can move on, be like, all right, here we go again. And just kind of let it fall to the wayside. My ex is notorious for stalking me and creating fake accounts. Most people's exes do, and like to troll you on the internet. You just get to the point of like, I'm not going to give this any more attention than it needs, because by giving it attention, they think that it gets to you. And so then you're going to keep going and going and going. And it's like this never ending toxic cycle. I found that when I started to shift my energy and focus on my own healing post, divorce, even though I was in the family court system, which is again just fucking horrendous, I was able to give myself the tools that I needed to appear more calm, more regulated in family court. What are the first steps or just some basic advice that you give to clients that meet with you? Like, how do I start healing from this? How do I start focusing on myself? What is something that they should start doing?
I think one of the best things you can do is get with community. So people who get it, because I feel like a lot of therapists don't get it and they can further harm. Or some of your friends may say things like, "Why aren't you over this yet?" Or "He never did anything to me," this kind of stuff. So try to move away from those people because even if they're well-intentioned, it's really re-traumatizing. I think that feels like you start to feel crazy again, and that's what you maybe spent so much time doing, or maybe you begin to feel devalued and the emotional bandwidth is limited. So I wouldn't really be doing that. So I think you should find your tribe, the people that really get it. Um, I think that's really important. I think also going to the five senses and getting
Yeah.
grounded around smells, having like some candles that you can burn, getting, touch. Some animals are really, really great for getting grounded. Taste peppermint gum, imagery, watching some beautiful images. But there's like, if you go to the five senses, there's a lot of magic. And it sounds like it's something silly, but really there's sort of like beauty in these details, because if you're taking the time to like radically love yourself, um, that's something that maybe we aren't accustomed to doing. And the narcissist is allergic to self-love and autonomy. And so that's amazing. And it should also help you to prepare to like keep others away from harming you when you're getting into these autonomous self-love things. Narcissists will move away from you in the future if you're really, really boundaried and like loving on yourself. I think we have to shift our cognition, because sometimes they make you feel so terrible about yourself. So beginning to like have an inner dialogue that's supportive of you and your strengths is really important. But
Yeah.
those are some things I think that feel really, really valuable.
And your book talks about, navigating toxic and manipulative people. I'm going to make sure that we share it with the audience, everyone that is listening. I I can't say enough about, first of all, your time. Thank you for being with me today, Vanessa,
Of
and
course.
sharing all of these tips and pointers. For those that have felt discouraged on this journey, know that you're definitely not alone. People like Vanessa, myself, we've all been through it. We've made it out onto the other side, and there's so many people that understand. And I, again, appreciate your time being with us today. Thank you for sharing all of this really valuable input. I know that everyone is going to definitely benefit from our conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
If today's episode resonated with you, make sure you share it with someone who needs it. You can find me on all platforms as Coach Bridget B, or at my website, breakingbadasscoaching.com. If you are ready to work more with me in a session, check out some of my guides, learn how to master your documentation, or join my exclusive community, you can do that through the link that'll be in the show notes. I want you to remember, you have survived this far. You've made it through this episode, and you continue to show up. You're going to continue to survive, and I will see you in the next episode.